It's important to recognize that multilingual learners in our classrooms are always learning through all the linguistic resources they have. So let's talk a little bit about learning through two languages. One of the big questions that we want to ask is, how do bilingual students access information and express what they know when they're learning through two languages? Teachers of bilingual students, those who function in more than one language during their day, can benefit from some basic understandings about language acquisition. And there are three key concepts we want to talk about: common underlying proficiency, conceptual reservoir, and the pathways that go in and out. Originally, there was the idea presented of a dual iceberg. That is that what we produce in language is built upon a deep knowledge within our brains, and that all languages access that same knowledge base. The term common underlying proficiency is used to counter the incorrect view of different languages occupying different places in our brains and disconnected from one another. In other words, underlying how we express ourselves through any language is everything that we know. For this reason, the following sequence of visuals was created to unpack the notion of common underlying proficiency and to provide some guidance for how to build on this understanding. It can be helpful to think of our brain as a conceptual reservoir that contains all the knowledge and understandings about the world. From birth onward, we add to this reservoir and we represent what we know. The pathways in how we add to our reservoir and gain knowledge are listening, observing, reading, and imitating and doing. These are receptive skills because they describe how we receive information. The pathways out are called expressive skills because they are the ways that we represent what we know. Expressive skills include speaking, writing, artistic expression, physical movement. Monolingual speakers of any language will always add to their conceptual reservoir and express what they know through their only one and only language. So in the drawing that you see, it's represented by the red arrows labeled L1 going in and out of the reservoir. A monolingual Thai speaker will add to and represent what they know from their reservoir only through Thai. A monolingual Finnish speaker will add to the reservoir only through Finnish, and then they can express what they know. A person can develop a shallow reservoir or a deep reservoir. And of course, our goal as educators is to fill students' reservoirs as deeply as possible. Notice that the deeper the reservoir, the wider the pathways. As we learn more, the pathways get stronger. As the pathways grow stronger, it is easier to add information and represent what we know. So what happens when we begin to learn a second language? We don't need to start a new reservoir. When people experience bilingual first language acquisition, children who from birth are exposed to more than one language, they develop two languages simultaneously. And this is also called simultaneous or concurrent bilingualism. These people have two L1 pathways in two languages simultaneously. The other kind of bilingualism is sequential bilingualism. In other words, a person begins to learn or acquire an additional language after learning their native or primary language. When we begin to learn a second language or an additional language, we don't have to build a new reservoir. Rather, we begin to express what we already know and understand through the second language. This is represented by the blue arrow labeled L2 going out of the reservoir. For example, once you understand the concept of shape, or that objects have a shape and that some of these shapes are regular and others might be irregular, that a three-sided shape is a triangle in English, a four-sided shape is a square, and a closed curve shape is a circle, then you don't have to relearn shapeness in order to learn to express those shapes in another language. You can see here that we have the English and the Spanish and the Finnish for triangle, triangulo, colmio. You not only can learn the words for different shapes in a second language, but you might also build on your knowledge of numbers to see how the names of some shapes are related to the number of sides. In English, the prefix tri in the word triangle is related to 3. In Spanish and Finnish, the names for triangle and square are related to the number of sides that are there. It is possible to learn new things and add new information to the conceptual reservoir even through a language we don't yet speak well. This is what we expect of second language learners in school every day. The blue arrow on the bottom right of the picture shows learning through a second language, that pathway. While it's certainly easier to learn new information and represent what we know through our first language and stronger one, and it might be more challenging to learn through a second language, it is not only possible, but is critically necessary to be able to learn through a second language in school. Research suggests that the academic success of bilingual learners does not depend solely on whether or not students receive mother tongue or primary language instruction, but to a great extent on the nature of the instruction that they receive through their second language, the second language pathway. So the blue arrows going in and out of the conceptual reservoir can be thought of as the second language pathway. The second language pathway encompasses all the strategies that teachers and students use to present, make sense of, and communicate information. The understandings that we have gained about what good second language pathway teaching looks like contribute to the academic success of all the students in your classroom. A final aspect of the conceptual reservoir that is essential to the nature of bilingualism is the idea of transfer, cross-linguistic transfer, and translanguaging. Simply put, anything that you know in one language, you can learn to express through any human language. Once information is in the reservoir, students can make use of that information through any language that they learn to speak. This may seem logical to us as adults, but many children who are learning an additional language in school feel or even receive the message that from their teachers that if they don't know it in the language of school, then they don't know anything. What's important to remember is that transfer needs to be mediated or orchestrated or facilitated by the teacher, and we need to let the students know that this is happening. We need to acknowledge that transfer goes both ways. The more we know in our first language, the easier it will be to learn about those topics in our second language or in another additional language. But if we learn something through our second language or our third language, we can think more deeply about that same topic in our first, if we're given the impetus, and sometimes we need to be provided the vocabulary. It's not automatic that students will know the vocabulary or words for something like measurement or principles of democracy or the life cycle of plants in their primary language if they've learned about those topics in school. But they need to know that those words exist, those concepts are represented in their home language, and that people who speak their language also discuss these topics and contribute to the world's knowledge about them. Our job as educators is to fill the conceptual reservoir as deeply as possible. It's important to note that reading and writing are means to accessing and adding to the reservoir, but they are not the ultimate goal. Conceptual development, knowledge about important topics, and higher order thinking skills are the ultimate goal. While these skills are greatly facilitated by literacy, they can also be developed by interacting with concepts orally, with visual images, with models and diagrams and charts and hands-on activities. Parents play an important role in this process as well. The less access that there is to mother tongue or primary language instruction or support in school, the more critical it becomes for parents to become involved in helping to deepen the conceptual reservoir of their children in their strongest language. As an example, think of Andre, a monolingual Finnish speaker, as he cooks with his mother and grandmother. While he and his mother are cooking, they're talking about doubling the recipe and substituting ingredients, and they reminisce about holiday foods or they tell family stories. Not only is there tons of language and thinking, they're strengthening their family bond and passing down important cultural information. But when Andre cooks with his grandmother, who's a recent immigrant with little Finnish proficiency, conversation is limited to a series of commands. Stir, put, not so much, little more, but not the rich dialogue he has had with his mom. When we ask immigrant parents to interact with their children in Finnish, then we limit their interactions. We want those interactions with parents to be as rich as possible. We want the types of interactions that Andre had with his mother to be happening all the time. So we need to let parents know, and we need to encourage them to talk in their strongest language with their children in order to be able to impart knowledge and stretch their thinking and strengthen their family ties. Many immigrant parents worry that continuing to speak in their mother tongue with their children will hinder their academic development in school. But the conceptual reservoir demonstrates that parents should use their strongest language to help deepen their child in their reservoir, and it's up to the school to tap into that knowledge and help students express it through Finnish. So a critical implication for instruction is that it's a gift to speak more than one language. Because our brains act as a conceptual reservoir, the more you know through any language, the better you will be able to do in school and in life. Students benefit when teachers organize instruction to help them take what they know in one language and express it through the other. This can't be a casual comment once or twice a year. It needs to be stated and restated and reinforced as often as possible with both students and their families.